Welcome back for episode 6. Today, it's all about the bridge. We're going to locate the bridge. We're going to get it in exactly the right place so ultimately the guitar plays in tune like it's supposed to. But before we do that, let's take a quick step back and let's look at what we did in the last episode. We made final selections of our hardware. We located and routed for the neck pocket, and we even tweaked the fit a bit to accommodate for a thin oil finish. And finally, we trued up the sides of the guitar, cleaning up the marks from the router and making sure the curves were nice and smooth. Today we're going to concentrate on precisely locating the bridge. We need to make sure that the bridge is at the correct distance away from the nut. We need to make sure the strings are centered over the neck in just the right way. Once we have that done, we're going to mount this bridge to the top of the guitar. After that, we're going to do the tricky part. Drilling the holes for the ferrules so the ferrules end up very nice and straight. So let's get started. First, we got to find the right bridge placement. To do that, we'll need a neck for this body. In the last episode, we talked about how our next video series is going to be about making a custom neck for this guitar. So for now, we're going to use this Fender licensed neck as a surrogate. So if we take a look, this neck actually fits in this neck pocket pretty well, but you'll notice there's a little bit of wiggle in it. So when we mount this, it's super important that we keep the center line of the neck exactly on center with the body, and you want the straight edge to align perfectly from the nut to the end of the body. That's going to make sure that when you line up the bridge, that the strings line up perfectly with the proper amount of clearance on both the bass and the treble side of the neck. Now, when we mount this, we can't just trust that the holes that are in the body will align with the holes Fender already drilled in the neck. We're going to test this by installing these screws so they just poke through where the neck cavity would be just a little bit. It's always a good idea to wax these screws, but one thing to be careful of on a new build like this, don't get too much wax on the body. It can mess up the finishing. That's why I suggest after you dip the screw into the wax, just wipe it off a little bit with a paper towel. It's also a good idea to do this by hand and not use a power drill, because one, you don't want to accidentally break off the head of the screw, and two, you don't want to accidentally strip out the inside of the wood as you're driving it in there with that very powerful drill. So that's about how far we want to put the screws. Once the screws are set, slowly fit the neck into the pocket. If they align, they should go right in the holes. If not, they'll make an indentation into the back and show us where we need to drill new holes. Take it off. And lo and behold, the holes align correctly. There's no indentations, so the screws are aligning with the holes that are already there. So this neck is good to go. Let's get it attached to the body, and you want to take the screws back out so you can install the neck plate. To do that, drive one screw in, and then we'll align the neck to make sure that it's on center. So we're going to basically do the same thing we did before, put it through so it just pokes through a little bit. I want this to be tight, but we don't put the grip of death on it. Just get it to where it's snug. And the reason I only put one screw in is that I can still shift it a little bit to the left or to the right to get it exactly where we need it. Then we'll clamp it, then we'll drive the rest of the screws home. I am going to use a very long straight edge. In this case, I have a 36-inch StewMac precision rule. I've already made center line marks on the nut, on one of the marker dots, and I put it on the end of the fretboard. So I have multiple center lines, and I have a piece of tape here and put a sharper line for the center line for the body. When we're working on something like this that's raised up a little bit, you have to be very careful when you measure, and you want to be directly over top. Otherwise you get parallax. When you look at it, it looks like you're a little off one way or the other. So you want to be right over top of it. You want that ruler to come right down there on the line, just like that. Now that the neck aligns properly with the body, all I really need to do is clamp it. This is on here pretty good, so I'm not really too worried about this moving. As a little added insurance, I'm gonna put this cam clamp on there. So what I did was I used these clamps really just to jack it up a little bit so I could get this clamp underneath of it and seat it. I can then just stand the guitar up. I'm gonna take these clamps off now and then just drive the rest of the screws in. Okay, once the second screw is set, then you can take the clamp off, put the rest of them in. Okay, we'll do a final check just to make sure that it's still on center, exactly where we want it. Okay, looks good. Now that we've got our neck on, it's time to measure out the correct placement for our bridge. On a Fender style guitar, the scale length is 25.5 inches. When you take it from the nut, the saddle position should be 25.5 inches away. If you look at the neck The exact center of the 12th fret hits at 12 3/4, and we'll just take that, double it, and that'll give us our 25.5. But rather than using lots of teeny tiny little lines, I'm gonna show you a trick. Take a piece of tape, put it over the 12 3/4 line right there. We're gonna get this lined up on center, make a mark on our tape right in the center of that fret. Next, take this 12th fret position and we're going to double it. That will put us at the location of our saddles. So we'll do that by simply moving the rule down to the center of the 12th fret, keeping it on our center line, and this will be close approximation where our saddles should go, right there. So now let's have a conversation about the bridge. These saddles will all adjust forward and backward, and we want that. I have set these saddles back about 7/32 from their maximum forward position. That'll give us plenty of room to move forward if we need to, and as you can see from the screw length, we have a ton of room that we can scooch backward, so we could push this back considerably more. So then by placing our saddle location right at the mark we made, we have plenty of room for both compensation and intonation. Now get a perpendicular line from the saddle location to the center line. And this is one of those measurements that's pretty fussy. You want to get this right. We're going to line up our triangle right at our saddle location and then make sure that we are right on the center line. Okay. And then we're going to do it on the other side. And I like to work on the other side. So we measure the square here, come up and go the opposite side of square. Okay, so that line is perpendicular to this line. Now what we're going to do is put this roughly in position. I've already gone in and marked the center location at the front of the bridge and the center location at the back of the bridge. If that looks a little off, it's because the tape is in the wrong place more so than the pencil line is in the wrong place. So we're going to roughly put this in position on center. And we want the very front edge of the saddles to be lined up with our line here. Again, it's not absolutely perfect that we get the bridge in exactly the right spot because we're going to be moving it around here in a second. And we want to look at our bridge location. And once again, I'm measuring from where the front edge of the strings leave the saddles, right there. So the saddles are about where we want them to be from the nut. The second thing we want to do, make sure the bridge is square, perpendicular to the center line. So the first thing I'm going to do to check that is to use my triangle and scooch right up to the line. Don't take the line, just right up to it. Sometimes it's easier to put the triangle exactly on the line and then bring the bridge to meet it. That looks pretty good. We can see that the front of our center line on the bridge aligns to the center line on the guitar. And if we check the back, we'll see the center line on the bridge in the back aligns perfectly with the center line on the guitar. The rotational component of the bridge is correct, and we've got the bridge centered in the guitar this way. So if the neck's on center, the bridge is on center. When we put the strings on, they should line up perfectly where we want them to at the edge of the fretboard. To make sure that we have the alignment correct so that the strings are equally spaced from the edge of the fretboard in, we are going to use a guitar string to prove that to ourselves. So from the nut slot to the saddle, you can see the string is spaced about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fretboard all the way to the top. And then we're going to check the same thing on the bass side. From the nut slot to the saddle location, we should have about the same distance. And that looks about the same to me. Very carefully, hold the bridge down, make a couple of small lines where the front of the bridge is, and then we're going to pick the bridge up and take it away. From here, once again, make perpendicular lines where the front of that bridge lines up, and these should be 7/32 away from the saddle locations. All right, we've got our bridge placement mapped out. Next, we need to temporarily affix it to the body to make sure it stays perfectly aligned when we mount it. Get a piece of double stick tape, put that on the bottom of the bridge, peel the tape, and then lightly set it down where we want it to be. Make sure we align our front right to the back of our line. Try to get our back exactly where we want it. And again, don't press down on it yet. We don't want to stick it down too tight. Okay, so now we're going to check all of our measurements again. Bridge location. Saddles look good. Okay, now squareness of the bridge. And I'll check my treble and my bass string locations once more. Everything looks good. Now, we really need to make sure that this thing is in place. doesn't usually like to scooch around at this point, but after we get it pushed down real tight, we're gonna check it again. Okay, check the center lines. Okay, everything looks good. Okay. So now that we have the bridge affixed to the top of the guitar, the next step is to physically mount it to the top. To do that, you want to remove the saddles. Now with those removed, you'll notice 3 mounting holes. The other 6 holes are where the strings actually come through the guitar. There's a couple different methods to drilling the mounting holes. One is that we could take an awl and that we can very precisely find the center of this hole, make a mark, then go over to the drill press and drill our hole. Another method is to use a self-centering drill bit like this. And if you notice, there's a chamfer right around that edge, which would fit right down in that chamfer and help this find center. When you choose a drill bit, you want it to be about the same size as the shaft of the screw, and I usually check it with calipers. We got the bit figured out. This is affixed firmly to the top. Let's take the neck off the guitar. Okay, when you do this, one thing that's nice is if you don't hold the body too tightly, then the body and the bit will just kind of find themselves, because that chamfer will mate right up to the bridge and then just make your hole. Every bridge has different length screws, so in this case I'm drilling about 7/8 of an inch deep. I am very pleased with how this turned out. This was actually the first time I've used that kind of bit, and it did exactly what I hoped it would. It put the hole right in the center of the mounting location. So now we're gonna put the screws in. Okay, so I'm just gonna seat these screws the last little bit and snug them up a little at a time so we don't accidentally pull it out of alignment. And we don't have to go crazy about tightening it down. There we go. Now, you might be saying to yourself, hey, you still have double-sided tape on the bottom of this. The reason that I didn't take the tape off is because we still have one more thing to do. We're gonna go back to the drill press and we're going to drill a hole in each of the string through locations, and we're gonna drill it into the top, maybe 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 of an inch into the top, and we're gonna use that as a locator to then drill our ferrules next. I have found a drill bit that perfectly matches the hole size. We want it to be tight with no wiggle room at all. So we're gonna take it over to the drill press. We're gonna drill in somewhere between, I'd say, 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 an inch deep into the top of this. One of the things you wanna do when you're putting these in is to make sure that you're not flexing your drill bit. Some people will let the drill bit find the hole, but I very much prefer to clamp it and know where that drill bit's gonna land before I ever turn the drill press on. So now we have our holes drilled. They're nice and shallow, they look nice and straight. And we're just going to take the bridge off now. So I'm gonna use a palette knife. Let's see if I can get that corner lifted up and get on there. Two things we don't wanna do is we don't wanna scar up our bridge and we don't wanna scar up the top of this guitar. So that's on there pretty good, and I don't wanna be more aggressive with it than I was. So I'm gonna take just a little bit of naphtha and run it under that tape, let it sit for a minute. That should help us de-stick some of the tape. Okay, so now the bridge is off. We're gonna clean the tape up off of this, but the important thing is we have 6 very nice straight holes, and that's gonna be super helpful when we drill the ferrules on the back. We're gonna go back over to the drill press, and we're gonna use this pin, and we're going to make a board that will align directly with these holes, so when we flip it over on the drill press, that the pin lines up directly beneath the bit, and we're gonna use that to drill the hole for our ferrules. These are the ferrules that we're using. These are flush mount ferrules, and we're gonna drill our holes so they fit just at the very edge of the back of the guitar. The secret to getting the ferrule holes to line up perfectly is this pin. It fits super snugly in that hole. Now this is a 5/32 inch pin and a 5/32 inch hole. Some bridges will use a different size pin. Some will use an 1/8 of an inch pin and an 1/8 of an inch hole. But just so happens that that bridge had a 5/32 inch hole in it, so that's what we used. But if you notice, it's snug. There's absolutely no wiggle in there. I mean, so snug, you might have to get a pair of pliers to pull it out. Next, let's grab a piece of scrap wood. Anything will work. Clamp this down to our drill press table, and then we're gonna drill a hole that goes pretty deep, because in my case I only need a little bit of the pin sticking out, so I'm probably going to drill all the way through. We're going to mount the pin, so then when we're done, that drill bit will be perfectly aligned on top of that pin. And I'm going to hit that with just a tiny little bit of water-thin super glue to hold that in place. Then we'll swap out the bit for a 3/8 inch, the perfect size to drill for the ferrules. I'm just carefully trying to find the hole for the pin, and there we go. It's very important before you drill these holes, you precisely set the depth stop on your drill press to make sure the ferrules fit flush. And then we're going to drill. So we'll just put the guitar on top, move it, move it, move it, move it, drill, 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 and everything should line up perfectly. That's pretty good. That's what we're looking for. Nice and straight all the way across. Everything lines up perfectly. And let's do a test fit. Just a teeny tiny bit below the surface, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to take these back out. We're going to go back over to the drill press and we're going to drill the holes all the way through. We've got a shallow hole on the top. We've just drilled for the ferrule on the back, but we haven't got the middle taken out where the string will actually go through the guitar. So we're just going to chase these holes back out to drill them all the way through, and then this part will be done. Okay, so now the holes are all the way through the body, the strings will go through, the ferrules are in, so we got a lot done. We have located the bridge, figured out exactly where it was going to fit, we drilled the holes to mount it on the top, we drilled the string through holes, we drilled for the ferrules, made sure everything was lined up nice and straight. On the next episode, we're going to locate and route for our pickup cavities, and we're going to locate and route for our control cavity. And if you'll remember, what we decided was that we're going to do a rear route. So we're going to put the electronics in from the back of the guitar so there's no cover plate on the top. So that's a little bit tricky, but not too hard. We'll take care of that in the next episode.